Waves of terror led to outrageous destruction. Thousands killed and wounded, and left behind was a useless naval fleet left in bad condition. The question is, why? The attack was led by the most unexpected people at the time for the Americans, but not for President Franklin Roosevelt. It was led by the Japanese. The surprising attack by the Japanese took Americans by total shock. 6 Japanese aircraft carriers launched 360 aircraft in waves attacking the United States naval fleet constantly. The waves were said to last for hours. The horrifying waves destroyed the U.S. naval fleet. The attack on Pearl Harbor was the turning point for the U.S. entry into the war. Since Japan mistakenly thought that the U.S. was going to declare war on them, they attacked the U.S. naval fleet to weaken the U.S. power on the water. Japan wasn't successfully able to destroy the fleet, but was able to weaken the U.S. power greatly. December 7th will be a date which will live in infamy, said President Franklin Roosevelt. December 7th, 1941, was the date on which the attack on Pearl Harbor occurred. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a command by the Imperial Japanese Navy. The attack was intended to be a very effective way on destroying the U.S. Pacific Fleet and a way to gain time to recover the natural resources that they needed, such as oil from China. The base, Pearl Harbor, at which the naval fleet was staying at, was attacked by 353 Japanese fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes. They were launched from 6 Japanese aircraft carriers. The outcome of the attack led to a loss of 188 U.S. aircrafts that were destroyed. 2,402 men were killed, and 1,282 that were wounded. 57 civilians were killed during the attack, and 35 were wounded. The objective for attacking Pearl Harbor was to destroy important fleet units, such as battleships or aircrafts, so they had no interference with their conquer over the Southeast Asia. The main targets that Japanese were aiming for was the battleships, since they were the most important ships. Japan launched the attack hoping to buy time to contain their position in China, and they were also hoping to buy time to increase their naval fleet's strength. On November 26, 1941, Japanese sent 6 aircraft carriers and set them out to the close position to Hawaii. A total of 408 aircrafts were intended to attack Pearl Harbor. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 8th, the U.S. immediately declared war against Japan. The drastic attack on the U.S. caused Germany and Italy to declare war on the U.S. on December 11th. The attack was the leading cause of the U.S. into the war. The attack on Pearl Harbor caused lots of Japanese-American civilians to be sent to Japanese-American internment camps where they would be watched. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was unsuccessful. None of the aircraft were touched, and some of the battleships were badly damaged at all. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was very unsuccessful. Barely of the aircraft were touched, and barely of the battleships were badly damaged. The attack on Pearl Harbor was very unsuccessful. Most of the aircraft were untouched, and some of the battleships weren't badly as damaged at all. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was unsuccessful. Some of the aircraft weren't touched, and some of the battleships weren't as badly damaged. The attack on Pearl Harbor was the leading cause of U.S. entry into the war. If Japan hadn't assumed that the U.S. was going to interfere with their plans, the U.S. wouldn't have declared war on them. I believe that it was a huge mistake for Japan to assume that the U.S. was going to interfere with their plans. The way Japan tried to interpret the situation was attacking Pearl Harbor. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a fail. The main goals were not met, and this is how they lost the war. But what if it was? What if the attack on Pearl Harbor was a success and the Japanese met all their expectations? Would the U.S. win the war? Would we all be here?